The paper cup hit the ground before he could react, splattering coffee across his worn shoes and the dusty sidewalk beneath. For a second, time seemed to freeze. The laughter that followed was sharp, echoing through the crowded bus stop like shards of broken glass. People turned to look but quickly turned away again, pretending not to see, pretending it wasn't their business. The man at the center of it all, Mr. Jonathan Reeves, stood silently, his hands trembling as the hot liquid soaked into the frayed cuffs of his pants. Once upon a time, Jonathan had been a history teacher, the kind who made even the dullest textbook stories come alive. But that was years ago, before the accident, before the layoffs, before life slowly took away everything except his dignity. He still tried to keep that, the dignity, even when the world didn't seem to care. That morning, he had woken early to go for a job interview at a local bookstore. He'd worn the same brown coat his wife, Eleanor, had given him years ago for his birthday. She had passed away 5 winters ago, and he hadn't let go of that coat since. It was his last piece of her, his armor. But now it was soaked in coffee and humiliation. The boys who had thrown the drink at him were laughing, recording on their phones, shouting things like, "Smile for the camera, Grandpa!" and "Welcome to the internet, old man." Jonathan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was silence, the kind that crushes a man's spirit little by little. A few feet away, a teenage girl named Nora stood frozen. She had been waiting for the same bus, earphones in, lost in her world, until she saw what happened. Something inside her broke. Maybe it was the way Jonathan looked down instead of fighting back, or maybe it was how the others just watched. She took off her backpack and stepped forward, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. "Stop it," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The laughter faltered. The tallest of the boys turned toward her, smirking. "Relax, we're just joking," he said. But she didn't move. "It's not funny," she said louder now. People nearby pretended to scroll through their phones, unwilling to get involved. Jonathan raised a hand slightly as if to protect her. "It's all right," he whispered, but she shook her head. "No, it's not." The leader of the group stepped closer, the arrogance in his grin fading when he noticed the look in her eyes. Not fear, but something fiercer. Nora pulled out her phone, recording him now. "Go on," she said. "Say it again. Let the world see who you are." The tables turned in an instant. The boys froze, realizing the power had shifted. The bus pulled up just then, and the crowd began to whisper, their faces filled with the shame they hadn't felt before. The boys scattered, their laughter replaced by silence, by fear of exposure. Nora turned back to Jonathan, who was still standing there, stunned. She bent down, picked up his paper cup, and handed him hers. "Here," she said softly. "You look like you need it more." Jonathan tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Tears filled his eyes, but they weren't from humiliation anymore. They were from something he hadn't felt in a long time. Kindness. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a video began to circulate online. It wasn't the one the bullies had recorded. It was Nora's. The title read, "Girl Stands Up for Elderly Man, Restores Our Faith in Humanity." Within hours, millions had seen it. Strangers from around the world flooded the comments with messages of support for Jonathan, sending offers for jobs, groceries, and even new clothes. But Jonathan didn't care about fame. That night, sitting in his small apartment with the lights dimmed, he stared at the screen through tears, whispering to Eleanor's photo on the table, "You were right, love. There's still good left in the world." Across town, Nora sat with her mother watching the same video, unaware that her act of courage had just changed 2 lives, Jonathan's and her own. The next morning, Jonathan returned to the bookstore for his interview, wearing his cleaned-up brown coat. The manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, greeted him with a smile that told him she already knew who he was. "We've seen the video," she said warmly. "And if you can inspire the world with silence, I can only imagine what you can do with words." He got the job that day. As weeks passed, customers would stop by just to meet him. They'd listen to his stories, his gentle voice filling the shop with warmth. Children gathered on Saturdays to hear him read aloud, his words turning dusty pages into living adventures. Nora often stopped by, too, sitting quietly in the corner, listening, smiling. Their bond grew into something beautiful, not of obligation, but of shared humanity. One afternoon, as a group of kids listened to him read To Kill a Mockingbird, he paused and said, "You know, courage isn't always about fists or loud voices. Sometimes it's a quiet girl at a bus stop who decides that silence is no longer an option." The children looked at Nora, who blushed, and Jonathan smiled. That same old teacher's smile that had once made classrooms glow. Months later, the bullies who had mocked him came to the store one by one. The world had not been kind to them after the video. Opportunities slipped away, respect vanished. They stood awkwardly by the counter, remorse in their eyes. "We came to say sorry," one of them muttered. Jonathan looked at them quietly, then nodded. "I forgive you," he said softly. "But promise me something. Don't let this be your legacy. Be better. Start today." They left with tears in their eyes, realizing forgiveness hurts more than punishment. That night, as the town lights flickered outside his window, Jonathan sat with a warm cup of tea, watching the world turn. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt human again. A few weeks later, a local TV channel ran a segment about him, titled "The Man Who Taught the Internet What Kindness Looks Like." When the reporter asked what he wanted people to remember, he smiled faintly and said, "That kindness is never wasted. It ripples even when you don't see it." His words resonated across millions of screens. People shared the clip with captions like "Be a Nora," "Help a Jonathan." Hashtags filled social media. Kindness still matters. Stand up for good. But for Jonathan, the real victory wasn't the views. It was the day a stranger came into the bookstore, bought a book, and left a note that said, "You made me believe in good again." Months rolled into a year, and the story faded from headlines, as stories do. But in that small town, kindness had found new roots. People started greeting each other again at the bus stop. Teens volunteered at senior homes. The same street where humiliation once echoed now heard laughter, gentle, human, real. And on one spring afternoon, Jonathan sat outside the store, sunlight warming his face, his old coat resting beside him. Nora walked up with 2 coffees, handing him one. "You still take it black, right?" she said. He nodded, smiling. "Some things don't change." She sat beside him, the street alive with noise and color. "You know," she said quietly, "that day at the bus stop, I almost didn't say anything." Jonathan looked at her, eyes soft. "But you did," he replied, "and that made all the difference." The world around them kept moving, cars, footsteps, voices. But for a moment, everything felt still. In that stillness lived a truth so simple, yet so easily forgotten. The smallest act of courage can echo louder than cruelty ever could. And somewhere, someone watching that story online would remember, maybe whispering to themselves the same words Jonathan once said to his students, "It costs nothing to be kind, but it changes everything."